This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.
Support for this program comes from the Gail and Tom Benson Charitable Foundation, committed to funding educational causes.
Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Those candidates who were recently elected to the New Orleans City Council might have been having some second thoughts this week with news that the city's budget is having serious cash flow problems, including making payroll. And as for the city itself, there's some mixed news, booming in some areas, busting in others. We'll look at these stories as well as an investigation of the program that administers the state's TOPS scholarship program. Hearing from the candidates in an intriguing Clerk of Court runoff, and the state legislature called into a special session. Answering the call for us are tonight's Informed Sources. Errol, Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. Don Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter. LeBron Joseph, news anchor and reporter, WGNO-TV, Channel 26. And Stephanie Riegel, staff writer, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate. Go over to LeBron first, because the news really rocked everybody this week. It's like, we can't meet payroll with the city of New Orleans. So
that was the latest.
What's going on?
And starting in about 2 months ago, was a whimper, if you will, that, hey, you know, we may be a bit over budget. And we started to, again, it got louder. This could be as much as $100 million. And then as the election rolls in, you know, some of the candidates calling and saying that, hey, we've got to get a bit more serious about this. Lena Moreno's calling in the legislative auditor, and this week finding out that we're at $160 million or as much as that, and that, yes, we probably can't make payroll by the end of the year. And it calls into question a whole lot of, wait a minute, how we get here. The biggest culprit, by all accounts, folks we talked to in City Hall as well as on the council side as well, overtime, an awful lot of overtime. Now that sounds like a lot of money. It sounds like a whole lot of $160 million worth of overtime, but there are associated costs with some of the service we've had here in the city. But this week, the finance director, Romy Schofield, called it a perfect storm, and I think that probably comes close to explaining exactly how we get here. We come into the end of last year over budget and overtime, so we're kind of starting behind the eight ball, if you will. The incident that colors most of what causes this overtime is obviously the terror attack. And that's at the top of the year.
First day.
First day of the year, and we were out there. And while that incident itself created a situation, and we had federal and state help, it also called for a significant amount of police, EMS, fire, all of that. That coloring the rest of everything else, because not very long after that, which is not necessarily an overtime crime-related sort of thing, but we've got the freeze and the ice and the snow, and so that shuts the city down for 3 or 4 days. On the heels of that, a Super Bowl where we've got to put on our best face, and that Super Bowl being colored, well, I missed an incident, the Sugar Bowl, which had to be moved for a couple of days, and that with heightened overtime and an awful lot of security. And then we've got a Super Bowl, which, you know, on the world stage, and the amount of resources it took for all of that. And no one's writing this check for New Orleans to use this overtime, mind you. Mardi Gras heightened again, level 1, the Tier 1 stuff and all that. We're getting help, federal and state, but still the city having to foot a significant bill for that. And all of the associated events for the remainder of the year, certainly things like Jazz Fest, French Quarter Fest, and all of these events. In the middle of that estimating conference thing, if you will, where, you know, the city determined that, hey, we're not getting the amount of revenue that we thought we would get for some of this stuff. We're not getting the revenue that we thought we would get from Taylor Swift or from the Super Bowl. And as you and I were speaking earlier, it could very well have been that, the revenue we were getting was probably eaten up some by some of this other stuff. Save it all to say, as we get toward this point in the year and we're looking at being able to manage the rest of the year, we're in a pickle, and in a pretty tough pickle. How we get out of this, and the city the mayor proposed raising some taxes and all of that.
Yeah.
But this problem is a bit more immediate than that in
So
terms
what do
of
we do
payroll
then?
and all.
Where do they find the money to pay their employees?
The council has proposed a $125 million loan or bond, if you will, from the state. It's not like that's an automatic. It would be from the bond commission. There is some pushback already on the state side. State Senator Jay Morris, we had on just yesterday, saying that, hang on a second, wait a minute, you don't come to us this late in the game asking for this kind of money. Why can't you raise taxes like some of these other municipalities, if you will? I tend to believe that it will probably happen. It won't happen without some screaming and kicking from the state, but I don't think the state of Louisiana needs to see the city of New Orleans fail in this way, where we've got to lay off city employees and not pay police or not pay fire or whatever the story is.
Is there a policy issue for the future here? Because we were all proud of ourselves, and justifiably so, for getting the Super Bowl and for getting Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
To a certain extent, is it better not to get those kind of things?
Oh, I don't think anyone wants to do that. I think that's our bread and butter in terms of us being able to do those.
Do we need to have a program or a policy in terms of building for the overtime?
I think that is the case. You bring up a great point, and those are points that the council people, certainly J.P. Morrell and our soon-to-be mayor, Helene Moreno, saying that, safeguards put in place that as we're navigating a year and understanding where we are and where we budgeted and we're not getting the projections that we need to get, that we make these moves much earlier in the year as opposed to waiting until the fourth quarter to not be able to pay our folks.
Well, and these projections that you're talking about, I mean, those were perhaps overly optimistic to get us through last year's budget cycle.
That is correct.
Because nobody really had any idea to think that Taylor Swift they kept acting like it was going to be the yellow brick road to, salvation forever. But there was no way that it ever was.
Right. But again, back to the terror attack, which colors all of that, no one at all had any of that in the bingo cards, that it would be a part of what was going on. The latest that I've seen, and already the city just moments ago sent out an email that they have cut some of the NORD services. Now, that sounds like a very small thing. It's the fall internship programs where the kids are paid. Now, there was some stuff happening, kids not getting their checks before. I think they're probably being a little bit proactive at this point. That's certainly not as serious as police officers not getting paid or EMS or fire, but that is in effect right now, some cuts that are being made.
Well, it's a big problem to tackle. It really is, and sort of caught people by surprise. A lot of people by surprise in terms of payroll.
There have been protests yesterday outside of the council meetings. The unions, as well as a number of city employees, concerned not only of not being able to get paid, but of losing their jobs as a result of this budget shortfall.
Just want to point out, we have a very unusual political situation in which Helena Moreno is still a council member at large, but yet she's the mayor-elect.
Yeah.
So she's she's a combination legislative branch and executive branch.
Yes, which hopefully is a plus for us to be able to that we've got on both sides, and her going in. I mean, she's been very, very active about putting together her team. In the last week we've seen the stars of this city pretty much that she's picked to be a part of all of those different committees and all of those transition committees. So hopefully, at least we know where we are, and if we can move up from here, it's a much better situation, at least when she's taking office.
Okie doke, we shall see. Thanks, LeBron. Stephanie, over to you. While we're talking about the city of New Orleans, you did a piece about good times, bad times for the city in terms of its economy.
Yeah, it came out of the annual New Orleans Metropolitan Association of Realtors annual forecast and symposium last week, which was actually in Jefferson Parish. So I was looking at the whole metro area and just sort of the big picture, and had a lot of interesting discussions out of there, backed by a lot of data. And sort of the takeaway from what I heard, there are some positive things happening. At the same time, there's a lot of pressure points, particularly on the real estate sector, and against the backdrop of an aging city with a shrinking population. And that whole shrinking population thing just cannot be overstated in terms of how that trickles down to so many different aspects of the economy, and our inability to attract a lot of new companies with high-paying jobs that are going to occupy space in some of these downtown office towers and things like that. So, those are, that's some of the negatives, and the real estate economy, which has been hit by, as we've talked about so many times on this show, the insurance crisis, inflation, and the higher interest rates that have really kind of kept the market frozen. More houses are sitting on the market for longer. They're not really appreciating in value. Although, as we were talking about before the show, they're better than they were, say, 5 or 10 years ago. So, I mean, home sale values are going up over the long term, but
not at the levels
people were used to, and people who need to get out now or who want to get out now can't afford to sell because they bought their homes when interest rates were 3 and 4%.
Right.
Now they're double that. People who want to get into the market can't afford to because the barrier to entry costs are so high. So those are real problems that we're facing at the same time that you sort of have this commercial office crisis brewing downtown and a lot of debt with those older office properties coming due in the next couple of years. But on the plus side, and Michael Hecht of GNO Inc. was on one of the panel discussions that I moderated, and other economic development people, and they point to legitimately a lot of positive things going on in the state's energy sector, in the industrial sector, all across South and Southwest Louisiana, where you have new plants coming in, hiring. One of the brightest spots, I think, lately, and we've written a good bit about this, is the maritime sector. One of our legacy industries that is continuing to evolve, continuing to grow and sort of reinventing itself with new sort of like drone technology, autonomous vessels that are now being built in some of our old shipyards. Bollinger Shipyard's doing gangbusters, landing these multi-billion-dollar, decade-long contracts to build ice cutters for the U.S. Coast Guard, partnering with Finland. And so
and then
those
AI.
And then there's the whole AI thing. So, of course, we have this massive data center under construction up in Richland Parish that we talked about the last time. And, I mean, the long-term effects of that remain to be seen, but it is, in the short term, not only bringing temporary jobs to the area, but it's sort of got Louisiana on the map. It's picked up, notice and attention of companies that might not have looked at us before. Like, oh, Louisiana's, so it's sort of spawning spin-off industries, so to speak, and they're also hiring a lot of local contractors in North Louisiana. So those are all positives.
And we're still looking at renewable energy, even though President Trump doesn't necessarily like wind. We're still looking at it as a positive thing.
And that was one of the
us.
interesting things that Michael Hecht I mentioned actually said in our discussion. He said that he thinks there's still really a future for renewables. You remember Governor John Bell Edwards' energy policy for Louisiana was sort of an energy for all strategy. We're going to keep the existing legacy fossil fuel, oil and gas companies here. We're going to transition to cleaner burning fuels with things like green and blue hydrogen, some of which pure environmentalists will tell you is marketing more than anything, but, playing, sort of middle of the road here. At least these fuels are cleaner burning than some of the older ones. And then we were doing true renewables, wind and solar, and had a huge future there, building a lot of the wind turbines down on the bayou. And certainly those programs, have sort of hit a wall, but Hecht said he doesn't think it's permanent and that long term, the markets are really driving this train, not our national energy policy, and that eventually the demand for those technologies are going to surpass, whatever sort of roadblocks we've put in the way, and that the markets will open up again. And hopefully it won't be too late for us by then.
Hopefully not. Okay, Stephanie, thanks a lot. Don, let's go over to you because parents who have been, or anybody who has been investing into college futures for their children, right now are kind of frustrated. Investing with the state through a 529 program,
Yes,
is that what it's called?
I must confess, I am an investor and a reporter on this front. LOFSA, the Louisiana Office of Student Financial Assistance, that's the office that oversees both the top scholarship program. It also oversees Louisiana Start. Louisiana Start is the state's vehicle for families to invest in future savings for college. So you invest as an individual or a family, but the state oversees it. There are state tax dollar savings to invest through them. It's just like all other investment accounts. You can daily check your balance. You can have direct draft from your paycheck right into the account. Back in late September, we're now in almost late October, we first noticed an outage that nobody would answer questions about. You couldn't get through to anybody. They ultimately said that, quote, there was an incident that, quote, disrupted their IT systems. That is really kind of all that has been said about the incident. I talked with the Louisiana State Police this week. They said all they can tell me is they are investigating. They referred any further questions to the State Board of Regents that administers the LOFSA program. The State Board of Regents referred me back to an October 17th press release and said that's all we have for now. Their press release said that they are working to continue to increase functionality of the system. They're making daily progress in the transaction backlogs, including resuming account trading. So has everybody's money been traded? Well, the stock market's actually done pretty well in this last month, and more than 40,000 Louisiana families who had money invested might not have enjoyed those gains.
So you've not been able to track any kind of gains, losses, as money?
If you log into your automatic system right now, it tells you that this is the first step towards full restoration of the START system. Please note, account information reflects the status as of September 26th, 2025. That message is still there today. They are paying out the disbursements to colleges in order in which they were received. So bills might be, depending on where your child goes to college, it doesn't have to be an in-state college to benefit from this in-state plan. Your bills might be late getting paid, in which case you're paying late fees. Hopefully the colleges will understand. It's a mess. My account balance has changed just slightly. In all this time that it says it's been reflective of September 26th, it's gone up or down $1,000 or so daily with no explanation.
Wow.
The TOPS program during this whole time has apparently been able to stay, that's the state money, not the individual's money, that's been paid. The state scholarships are being paid and that's being handled, but no one, and I mean no one, is talking about what's happening here. The state treasurer, the LOFSA itself, the State Board of Regents, the Louisiana State Police. Was it an IT hack? Was personal information handed over? Is that money safe? Nobody knows.
Have you talked to a cyber expert?
I have not yet.
Okay.
So it's just described as an incident.
It's an incident.
So what does that mean? What kind of incident?
That is total.
It's chaotic.
Can't say that word.
And yeah, I mean, it's some words we all can't say. The accounts have experienced delays, and they say soon you'll resume being able to do paycheck drafts to it soon. But nobody, and I mean nobody, has answered any questions. I finally got a return email 2 weeks after I sent it as a consumer. And when I started sending emails as a reporter, I heard a little bit more, but still very cryptic.
Very concerning, I'm sure. All right, thanks a lot.
It's probably more than, if people have the average amount for Americans to have in a 529, that would be $19,000-ish dollars. There are more than 40,000 accounts. So we're talking about at least $800 million of state taxpayer money.
Wow.
At least $800 million. It's probably far greater than that.
Okay, I hope we get answers, Dawn.
Yes,
okay,
I'm trying.
Thanks a lot. E, let's go on over to you right now because our legislature is yet again in a special session. Why?
And it's not about insurance this time. Okay? I guess political insurance in a sense. Okay, next year is an even-numbered year, which means it's one of those years when we elect a Congress again. Right now, and by the way, we're back to the old party primary system next week, where all the Republicans vote in one pot and all the Democrats in another. So right now, the primaries are scheduled for next April and May, and then in November they'll finalize them. This has become a very touchy issue because there are 6 congressional districts, and you can't talk about congressional districts without talking about race. All right. Of the 6 congressional districts, 4 of them have a white majority, hence 4 of them have a Republican majority. 2 of them have a black majority, hence 2 of them are Democrats. If you remember, before the last election, there was only 1 district that had a Democratic district. That was the greater New Orleans area, represented by Troy Henry. Since then, Troy Henry. I'm sorry. Yeah. Since then, there was a court case and the challenge and the special master, and anyway, they declared you got to have another black majority district. And so a district was kind of carved out around the Baton Rouge area, going up into northeast Louisiana.
Yeah. Right across the state, like a seat belt. Yeah.
Sort of, but this was a district that Garrett Graves, who was a Republican, represented, but the way it was cut, he didn't have a majority anymore. And so he could see that he was going to lose his seat. And Cleo Fields got it. And so with that, you have 2 districts, 2 black majority district, Troy Quarters and Cleo Fields. Since then, there's been a case, someone has said, well, look, who says that when you figure out these things, it always has to be by race? You know, maybe there's other ways of doing it. Anyway, so the Supreme Court is considering this case, and there's an indication that they're looking at it, and some people think that maybe there's going to be a change. Maybe the Supreme Court is going to say, well, you don't have to do it by race. I mean, maybe there's another way of doing it. So some people, particularly Republicans, are looking at this, and they see a possibility of either gaining a seat or losing a seat. But this all has to happen before April, before the elections. Actually, the qualifying, I think, is in January. So it has to happen soon. So that's why they're calling for the session to essentially move back those elections to May and June. And to give more time for this to be figured, and hopefully that will come out more in favor of somebody. All right.
Because we're waiting to see what that Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court had a hearing. We're waiting to see what the result will be. Could be before the end of the year. May not.
Yeah. And this is not just black and white. It's really about power. Okay. Because it could affect the Republicans' power balance. The Republicans, control, but with a very narrow balance. And so all this could affect nationwide congressional politics.
Yeah.
And so that's really what people are looking at. How is this going to affect the power balance? So a case that originated in Louisiana is going to have important national implications.
Yes, and the Voting Rights Act.
The Voting Rights Act, you got it, yeah. Section 2.
Yeah, very big. But right now, this special session of our state is regarding the dates for the election.
The dates, yeah, that's the first step of it, yeah.
Okie doke. All righty, thanks a lot. LeBron, let's go on over to you.
Sure.
Talking about elections, we're going to have a runoff on Orleans criminal clerk of the office. Clerk of Court. And that election really kind of turned into a real testy one toward the end. And
yes,
now it's in a runoff.
Yes, it did. And most down ballot runoffs don't get this much attention in terms of, or intrigue, if you will. You certainly have District A, Lakeview and all, for the council, and you've got District E, New Orleans East predominantly. But the Clerk of Court's race, and it's an interesting one because Darren Lombard is the incumbent, and by most accounts, I mean, he probably goes into this race as a heavy favorite. And there, over the course of campaigning, this becomes a back and forth with he and a gentleman who a lot of folks didn't know about, a gentleman by the name of Calvin Duncan, who had spent 30 years in Angola for what he says is a crime he didn't commit. It was a murder charge. The word exonerated became the lightning one in here because, according to Calvin Duncan, he was exonerated, according to Darren Lombard and certainly Liz Murrell on the other side, saying, no, exoneration is the wrong word because you at least admitted to manslaughter or pled guilty to manslaughter in a plea deal in order to get out. Calvin Duncan says that, hey, I did that in order to get out of jail after 30 years, But his story is intriguing in that he, you've heard of a jailhouse lawyer, and that's what he became. He became someone who studied the law feverishly in jail, eventually becoming a paralegal once he got out. He was freed by the Innocence Project, by the way, and eventually got his law degree. He is an attorney now. Darren Lombard is not an attorney. What you have here is someone in Lombard who worked in the office, in the clerk's office, under Arthur Morell for a period of time, ran for clerk of Second City Court. He was that on the West Bank for a period of time, and then won the big clerk's office, which is over elections here as well. Calvin Duncan's experience, as he puts it, is life experience, in that he has seen how difficult and how dysfunctional the office operates in terms of it being one of the few paper-based offices in New Orleans. And that's an important point, or in the state, I should say. It's an important point when you consider that some of the records it was in the news that some of the records had been destroyed by some city workers and all that. So it's an intriguing race. It'll be interesting. Calvin Duncan, I think, landed at 47% in the primary, and Darren Lombard at 46%. It was one of those surprising outturns, but they're in the runoff now, and it's all gloves off, if you will.
And Duncan says that the issue is the records. The records are extremely important to conduct legal proceedings. And during his years in Angola, he said he had difficulty accessing records.
For months, if not years sometimes. And he says that is still the problem with that office in terms of getting records. It's not a digitized office. Darren Lombard says that is to come before the year is out, that the office will be digitized, that it is a huge job to digitize records ad infinitum in the past.
So we'll be hearing a lot from these. And also an interview that you did with
Yes, an interview I did. It's going to air this week.
Okie doke. All right, guys.
Sure.
It is now time for Roundtable E. Over to you.
Okay. Last August 16th was the first run of the new Amtrak train, the Mardi Gras special. A couple of weeks ago, Amtrak reported that from August 16th to like the middle of October, they had 19,000 passengers going back and forth. Very successful. For big events like football games and things, they're actually adding extra cars. So
that's really good to hear. Very good.
Good news.
Done.
We're about a week away from setting the clocks back, and also from the coldest weather we've had yet. So reminder to check your smoke and carbon monoxide detectors and your heat systems.
Yeah, absolutely. Done. LeBron, over to you.
Basketball season's here. Woohoo! In the middle of football season. It's hard to believe the Pelican season's already starting, but basketball and NBA, it's so many games. And so, we start. They've already played their first, and we get the home opener this weekend.
Okay. Steph?
Archdiocese of New Orleans bankruptcy case, which we love to talk about. Votes are due next week, October 29th, on the settlement plan that would resolve this thing. So we shall see. But they've been coming in for the past 6 weeks or so.
Okay. All right. All right, guys. Thanks so much for being here. And thank you all for joining us. We'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
Support for this program comes from the Gail and Tom Benson Charitable Foundation, committed to funding educational causes.
This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.